The Dust Bowl is a hydroclimatology event that forever changed the United States. Some events that led up to the Dust Bowl included the Homestead Act of 1862, the Kincaid Act of 1904, and the Enlarged Homestead Act of 1909. All three incentivized farming in the Great Plains, which caused a massive influx of inexperienced farmers to move to the Great Plains. During the 1910s and 1920s, the demand of wheat increased. Farmers responded by plowing millions of acres of native grassland to plant wheat and other row crops. Once the Great Depression hit, wheat prices plummeted. Farmers responded with plowing more grassland to harvest an extra crop to help offset the wheat prices. In 1931, the onset drought caused crops to begin failing. This exposed the bare, overplowed land that once had prairie grass holding the soil in place. The soil was easily blown away, eroding the soil and causing massive dust storms. Several drought years followed 1931, further deteriorating the poor soil conditions. By 1934, an estimated 35 million acres of farmland had been rendered useless, while another 125 acres was rapidly losing topsoil. To give you an idea, 125 acres is roughly the size of 75% of Texas. By 1940, 2.5 million people had moved out of the Plain States. Estimated 1/4 of the population before 1930 had moved, making it the largest migration in American history. Areas most severely affected were western Texas, eastern New Mexico, the Oklahoma Panhandle, western Kansas, and eastern Colorado. These areas combined were collectively called the Dust Bowl. In 1933, FDR introduced the Agricultural Adjustment Act, which controlled the supply of 7 basic crops by offering payments to farmers in return for taking some of their land out of production. This went a long way in helping control land erosion. In 1935, FDR created the Soil Conservation Service, aimed to educate farmers on better soil practices. The program was successful. Over 40,000 farmers signed up. In 1937, FDR was at it again. He created the Farm Security Administration to help poor farmers by resettling them onto more productive land, promoting soil conservation, emergency relief, and loaning them money. In 1934, FDR's administration wanted to plant 1,000 miles of trees stretching from Texas to Canada. In total, he was hoping to do 20 million trees. This was known as the National Shelter Belt Program. The idea behind the program was that a giant windbreak would help shield crops and prevent erosion. Landowners filled out applications, gave up pieces of land, and agreed to maintain the trees, and in return, the government carried out the program and provided protection for the farmers. State Forester Tom Murray agrees that the program was a success. He went on to say, "This used to be a cotton field, if I remember right, looking back at the history, and it just blew. It's sand and it blew. By putting this here, it stopped that south wind from blowing across this field," unquote. Current farmers are considering doing away with the windbreak. Maintaining the trees are a burden, and then also if they got rid of the trees, they would have extra land to grow extra crops. In April 1935, Hugh Hammond Bennett was on his way to testify before Congress about the need for soil conservation legislation, when Washington, D.C. was hit by a dust storm that had traveled all the way from the Great Plains. The dust storm was severe enough that citizens claimed it had blacked out the sun's rays. Bennett exclaimed, "This, gentlemen, is what I have been talking about. Congress passed the Soil Conservation Act later that year. In 1936, President Franklin D. Roosevelt put together the Great Plains Drought Area Committee. The committee was in charge of making sure nothing resembling the Dust Bowl happened again.